Welcome to Beyond the Walls podcast. I'm your host, Kylie, and I am so excited to be able to have this conversation with you to help teach you tools, ideas, support on how to go beyond your walls too. Are you tired of feeling stuck and trapped and like a victim in your own life? Maybe you need to find a new way to look at it. Look at your situation from a different angle. Maybe we need to learn and take a look to see how we can re-choose or recreate a life that is going to bring you joy and purpose and feel free and exciting. So let's get started on today's message. So you guys know that I've been talking a lot about this whole concept of being committed versus attached. And there's that tension in that space between how do we not give up on our goals when walls come in our way, but still be able to be flexible enough to be on the journey. And I recently did a really wild, adventurous thing. Of my co-conspirator with me today. So excited for her to share this story with us. Her name is Tracy. And I'm going to let Tracy kind of tell us first how we met, how we become friends. Welcome, Tracy.
Well, hi, everybody. Thanks for listening and taking the time. And thank you for inviting me on this. This will be an adventure in itself.
True.
I've never done anything like this before, but I love the experience of it. And I love being able to share. So
yeah.
The journey and how it began. So how we met was we were in Texas. I'm from Minnesota, but I was down there for a conference about leadership and networking and connections and what's possible with connections. And it was inspired to make this happen, I guess. So we were waiting for our flight at Frontier. Don't ever. Lesson number 1, the kids learned, never fly Frontier. So we were waiting for our flight, and we got a notification that it was 2 hours delayed. And I was like, okay. Well, I just wandered around through the airport terminal and just got some steps in while I waited. I had left, and when I came back, thinking the flight was only 2 hours delayed, the friend that I met at the terminal gate said the flight's been completely canceled. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And so what do you do then? You're stranded in Texas. It's a Thursday afternoon, and you want to go home. So I had joked with him of like, hey, you want to rent a car and drive to Minnesota? And he's like, no, you crazy. Like, I'm not doing that. And I was like, okay, just kind of like just throwing that out there. Just like I was joking, but I was like, maybe, but whatever. I'm always for adventure. My parents are very adventurous. They're actually hitchhiking and backpacking around Costa Rica at the moment. And so we're at the ticket baggage claim, and the entire Frontier flight line was there, and we're all just standing there for a very long time. And I, out loud, just a little bit overly spoken, was like, hey, anybody want to rent a car and drive to Minnesota? And like kind of joking, but just throwing out there because life is an adventure. And my new little friend here in the back, she's like, couple, like 4 people back, she's like, are you serious? And so the adrenaline kicks in. There was so much adrenaline at this moment. It was wild. And her kids were off at the baggage claim, retrieving the luggage. And when they came back, she had asked them, I'm not really sure how to say this, but would you be comfortable if we rented a car with Tracy here and like drive to Minnesota? And they're like, so that's what began the trip. So do you want to take over the next couple steps from me?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I want to tell you a little bit more of my backstory. I don't know if you do all of those little pieces along the way, but it totally tracks why, like, it just worked for us to do this thing. So I would say, so me and my kids are at the airport. I'm trying to get to Minnesota, where my brother and his family live. My nephew is graduating high school, right? So you have to go home. Like, you're not home. You're trying to get home. And I'm trying to get to Minnesota for a very specific event, right? And so normally 14-hour drive. My family, my husband and me and my 2 kids, we drive 10 hours easy all the time. So driving is no big deal, but my husband wasn't able to go with us to this graduation. And so I can't do 10 hours by myself. So that's just some backstory on me and my kids and like the normal way that we would travel. So we rarely fly anywhere anyway. Yeah, we find these amazingly cheap tickets on Frontier. I've never flown Frontier before. So, yeah, lesson learned, don't fly Frontier if you have to be somewhere by a specific time. Leave lots of wiggle room. So, yeah, we get to the airport there. And mind you, we're not supposed to arrive to Minnesota until like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, as it was, I think, right? So yeah, we're
Yep.
sitting there, we're all getting bored, we're using up our good energy, we get the call, and we're all just like, are you kidding me? Right? My kids are just like, we have to wait 2 more hours here. Like, how can we possibly do that? And I'm thinking in my mind, I'm preparing for the worst because then I'm like, okay, now we're not arriving until 1 o'clock in the morning. What if it gets canceled? Like, what if we sit here for 2 more hours and then the flight gets canceled again? Right. So I'm already trying, like, in mom mode, like, how are we possibly going to get to the next step? I already kind of started looking at like what the next flights are for Frontier, and I already know it's bad news. Like, there's nothing.
48 hours or something. Yeah, it
Yeah,
was a long time.
totally a
That's
long
what
time.
provoked it. Otherwise, we would have waited till the next flight. But 48
Exactly.
hours.
Yes.
Like,
It was a really long time. Yes. And then you're looking at other airlines and they're like $300, $400, right? So like I'm thinking in my mind, if we don't like if we don't get on this flight, we're not going to make it to the graduation, right? That's my mind. So luckily only like 30 minutes later they canceled it entirely. So we didn't have to wait the whole 2 hours, which was nice. But yeah, so me and my kids, I'm just like I'm debating how much money am I willing to spend to get on another airline versus we're not going to graduation. And I have returning flights to think about, right? Like, are they going to refund me those? What are we going to do? So we did check bags. So yes, so we had to go all the way back to the old school, back to the gate. Luckily, they stood in line for almost an hour. Like by the time we got up
long
to the
time.
front desk and by the time my kids got back to me, like it took almost at least 40 minutes to get us all back to the same space. And so in my mind, I'm already thinking silently in my head. I hadn't made any friends yet, but like chatting with people. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if I had another person, I could totally drive. And so that must be how it started. Cause if you started the like ingest and I overhear it, cause you were kind of talking with probably the friend that you met, and there was just some other people. We were all just you know, commiserating together on how inconvenient our lives are at this point, and we're so mad at Frontier. So I feel like I had already kind of talked with you enough. Like I was listening to you probably then from afar of like, oh my gosh, she seems like a perfectly normal human being. She's got to get home and she's willing to drive with me. Like I just need a partner. I need a driving partner and I can drive. My kids are going to be fine. Like we can make it. This is our only hope, right? So talk about
Yeah.
lemons to lemonade situation. So I guess that brings us up to speed why we were both willing to go. Recently telling them this week, I was like, you guys, I'm going to have Tracy on the podcast, like, and we're going to talk about our adventure. And so I was asking them, I was like, now, like, would you done it? Was it a good experience? And I would say both of them were like it worked out. So no regrets. I don't think that they're like permanently scarred or traumatized by it. Yeah, so we start scheming and plotting on how we're going to do this at the airport, right? So we just go rent a car. We start texting all of our loved ones with all of our identification. I think that's what also helped me feel more at peace is we were sort of able to acknowledge how like but also is this creepy? Like can we completely trust each other? I think we can. Like we're exchanging our phone numbers and our full names and sending it to all of our family members. We took a picture of all of us together so everybody had eyes on everybody.
Yep.
Um, which I did call my husband. I was like, this is what I'm thinking about. Like, is that okay with you? And he's like, I mean, I think he was more in his mind was thinking like, it's driving through the night if that's really what you want to do. When the kids feel good with it, like, I mean, I'm okay with it. If that's what you want to do, go for it. And I was like, okay, there was a couple of things that you had said that I felt like you were trustworthy. I feel like we were trying to figure out how we could get a deal on rentals, and you were calling your sister. We were, I mean, yeah, the scheming was going
Yeah.
all the ways of like, how much would it cost us to rent a car? Do we know anybody in the business? And I feel like when you had a friend or a family member that was like, here, I can get you this discount, but you're going to have to make up sort of a story about
Yeah,
it.
I can't lie. So
I
she,
can't lie either. And I was like, okay, if she's not willing to lie about this at the other end, I will trust her with my life and my children.
yeah, it was just instinct of being able to trust your own judgment. And we don't need a plastic bag to tell us that you're going to suffocate if you put it against your face. Like,
Yeah.
it's, it, it's trusting your own instinct that gets you through situations. And while we were waiting in line at the Frontier ticket gate, I was like, I'll be the first one to say I'm really happy we weren't on a mechanical error flight. I don't want to crash. I'm really happy this happened.
Yes.
It's that same theory of if you get a nail in your tire and you're like, oh no, I have a nail in my tire and it stumps my time. Sometimes there's a reason. Like that bridge that just fell, would have been on it if it
Yeah.
weren't not for the tire. So
Yes.
there's things happen and trust your gut.
Yeah. Totally trust your gut. So what made you, I guess, what was your sign for me that you were willing to risk that adventure with me?
You're a mom of two. Like you have way more high risk than I did. So if you're willing to take that adventure with me, I'm my parents, as I slightly mentioned before, like super hippies. Before I turned 13, I had been to the 48 continental states.
Mm,
We hitchhiked around, we slept in a car, we slept in tents all over random places, the side of the road. We just had an adventure. And I was very comfortable with the fact of sharpened instincts because of my prior experience. And
mm,
again, you had much higher risk than I did.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
I appreciate you taking that adventure with me.
Yeah.
And so the funny story was, so you were calling your husband and making sure it's okay that you can drive 17 hours or 14 hours across the country with some random stranger.
Yeah.
And I called my partner and I had told him, hey, I'm doing this. He's like, whatever you do, you just go right ahead. And I said, can you please let my parents know just in case, whatever. And he texts my parents saying, FYI, your daughter's hitchhiking from Texas to Minnesota. No response, no nothing. And 20 some hours later, when I get home, I call my parents. I'm like, hey, mom's home. And like, just there was no like
That was the
panic or
level.
anything. Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
even like
So,
the term hitchhiking, like, is that that seems like the most extreme way he could describe it as well. And yet they
yeah.
still were like they were not phased in any way.
She'll be fine.
You know that we taught her well. It sounds like they were just really proud of you. Like that sounds we're so
Oh,
proud we could pass our
very,
ability on.
very proud that I was willing to take an adventure like that.
Oh,
So,
that's so fun. Part that when I was hearing you talk about, because I feel like you had just mentioned, and maybe that's how you were just dropping the little seeds of like, I've driven a lot. I've driven across the country before. And something, because most people, I don't know about you, but I feel like most people, when I tell them we're driving 10 hours, they like practically die. They're like, why would you possibly ever drive somewhere that far? Like, that sounds like torture. And I'm just like, I don't know. That's just as natural and normal for us. So 14 was going to be a little bit more, but not unreasonable, right? Like, not like we need to stop halfway and get a hotel kind of thought. And so I'm not used to other people even looking at a long road trip like that as a normal thing to do and not torture. And so I think that was the other part that was like, okay, so she's done it before. She's an experienced roadie and
oh yeah.
she seems really friendly and she's responsible and she's trustworthy. I'm like, let's do this. We'll be just fine. So for all of you, those that are listening, because yeah, we definitely had a lot of reactions when we got to Minnesota. So, I mean, it's not a really spoiler alert, but obviously we made it in one piece. My kids and I made it to graduation. We had a great time. But yeah, everybody was just like, I can't believe you did that. Like, what do you mean? Are you the aunt that drove through the night? You know, like all the stories. Everybody would like wanted to know all about it and what were we thinking? And I can't believe it. And I would have nevers and you know, all of the people's reactions to it. Um,
Yeah.
which is so funny because then all of a sudden, like on the back end, you're like, did I do something weird? Like, was that unwise? Like, what was wrong with what we did? Like, that just seemed totally normal to us. So funny.
Well, clearly my parents were like, "Oh, good job, proud of you for like taking adventure." Grandparents are like, you are your parents' children and child, I guess.
Yeah.
And just another when we were leaving the car park with the I can't
Rental.
even remember what car, the rental car, yes.
Yeah.
Um, I asked everybody, I was like, can we I have one ask from everybody. And I'm at this point, I'm kind of like leading the ship. And everyone's like, yeah, what do you want? What do you need? I said, somewhere in a rural area, I would really like to pull over and look at the stars. And the
Mm,
unanimous car was like, yeah! Like everyone was just ready to have an experience, an adventure. And
yeah.
it was such a good energy amongst the car. Your kids were just terrific spirits through the whole thing and just
Yeah.
relaxed like they've done every road trip ever. Like they were comfortable and it
Yeah.
was really fun to
Yeah.
watch, and we'd stop at gas stations and fill up and stretch your leg.
Yep. Get ready to get out. Put your shoes on. Go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Climb
Yeah.
over the seats and good stuff.
I feel like looking back, the parts that I would not do again, like I would have to think twice. I mean, I would go anywhere with you. And I don't regret like that part of it. Like it was so much fun. And did not regret any of those things. But I am too old to stay up all night long driving. Like the recovery physically for me was very unexpected. Like if out of counting the costs, right? I was like, okay, one, and it saved us money, right? We got a refund on our flights. We got to split the rental car. We split the gas. Like to get three people, it saved me money. It got me to graduation. My kids did a great job. I probably would not have done it again if it was during the day because it did actually really help that we drove through the night. So you guys, we didn't leave the airport in our rental. It was like 9:30 at night, I feel like.
I think
Might
it
have
was later,
You
but
think it
yeah.
was later? It might have been later, but it was late. Like it was dark. So luckily everyone was fed. My kids were just mostly going to get in the car and they were going to sleep. It was quiet. Me and you chatted up in the front seat most of the way, switched drivers, took turns. Luckily gas stations were open. I was like, once we were on the road, I was getting a little bit like, oh, are things going to be open? Because I mean, if you anybody who doesn't know me, I drink a lot of beverages. I'm usually double fisting coffee and water all day long or Diet Coke. And so I got to go to the bathroom. So I'm like, I'm going to need, I think that was my warning to you. I was like, my only request is that I'm going to need to stop and go to the bathroom. So
Right.
we can look at the stars and we got to go to the bathroom. Um, but I don't think I could have done it if it was daytime and my kids were awake. We would have had to stop more because we just weren't prepared. Like I wasn't prepared for a road trip, but through the night it was fine. The kids slept the whole time. Um, and then the recovery. That is one thing that we are road trippers, but we were never the road trippers that drive through the night to get someplace. Like nothing about that sounds exciting to me. But luckily we got along. Like there was no tension, there was no conflict, there was no like I'm sick of this person, get me out of here. At least I didn't feel that way. Did you feel that way?
No, not at all. It was really good for experiences for the kids too, because we learned lesson number one is never fly frontier, and number two, sometimes strangers are okay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
uh but we did, so I do remember one gas station we went to, because again, it's the middle of the night, probably wee hours of the morning. There
Yeah.
was one gas station that it was a little sketchy, and we decided to make so if you are doing any road trips or anything, make sure you check your surroundings. Don't be completely naive going into the darkness. Like,
Yeah.
um, So there was one gas station. We're like, nope, we're not going to stop at this one. We're going to go. We have enough gas. So every time we stop, regardless of if we had gas or not in the car, we always put gas in the car.
Yes.
So always be prepared. Thank your future self. Like, be
Yes.
kind to your future self at every situation.
Yeah.
And I think the only like actual stop we had besides a gas station, we stopped at McDonald's, just a quick little breakfast, and continued on our
Mhm.
way. So
Yeah, and that might have been
I
our
didn't.
longest stop. Like, but we almost like needed to
Yeah.
get out, right? Like then my kids were awake. They're like kind of ready for the day, but they also didn't really sleep that much through the daytime or through the night. But yeah, that's true. That's a good road trip advice. That would be, and we bought a couple of supplies. We could charge our phones. We had water to drink. We weren't going to starve. We bought a few snacks. And then, yes, whenever we could, filled up because we didn't want to be stranded. We're not going to be stranded in the middle of the dark. And everything's a little scarier at nighttime, too. So that was a little bit creepier, I would say. Like, I'm not usually used to driving in the dark everywhere we
Yes.
go. But yeah, that's true. Those were good reminders and tips for y'all if you end up doing one of these adventures. But I think that was what we found out either, but it also tracks with even how you started in the beginning and just our personalities, why this worked out so well for us, is because we both attended a transformational leadership workshop that it was significantly transformative to my life. But at least just you had gone and it had impacted you in a positive way, but it automatically when you click with somebody and you have profound foundational connections, right? Like things in common. Because we didn't really know what we did or didn't have in common necessarily. Besides, we both had been on long road trips before. We both clearly were adventurous. We both were clearly sort of trustworthy, honest people and extroverts for the most part, right? Like we were both just excited for adventure in life. And we kind of went on that. But I think it's also really cool when you talk to people, and this is probably to your point of like when we aren't always expecting all strangers to be scary and dangerous or that they're out to get us, it allows us to be open to some really cool connections. And I think that was like immediately once you had told me that you had attended this thing, and I was like, I've been there before. And we just all of a sudden had a language about us, right? Like we just it said a lot about us and it automatically just brought us that much closer immediately just based on sharing that one commonality. And then yeah, being able to hear like the crazy stories where I was like, oh yeah, this is not the craziest thing you've ever done. This is actually very tame for you. Or just it at least luckily early on in the trip it confirmed of like okay, this was I feel completely safe, like I was completely at ease, and we were both going to just be focused on being responsible. Like you were on high alert for deer because you spent most of your time up north, which I used to, but I wouldn't have been thinking about deer. Like I don't drive through pretty good drivers. Like those were some of the things that I thought about later that I was like, you could have been a crazy driver, just irresponsible, a speed demon. Like, I don't know, like
Right.
we really did trust a lot in each other by taking this
Mhm.
adventure on. But I think it's just a lot of fun just to get to know you and find
Yeah,
out,
we
all the ways that we had in common and all the ways that we didn't, but we still were.
absolutely.
What was that like for you?
It was just really interesting because a lot of the things that you told me that were your goals in life and your missions and like how you really wanted to be a mom, and I'm 32 and I don't have that feeling, but I loved hearing your vision and your views and your experiences and what makes you happy and what you want to do. And I have a very different view on some things, and I love the diversity of being able to hear your life and your opinion and your points of view, and not 'cause in our culture there's so much these days that it's so divided, and if you're not like me, I'm not talking to you. Like
Yeah.
it's a little sad. So I
Mm-hmm.
really appreciate the opportunity to see somebody else's point of view that you might not think.
Yeah.
I don't, it's just really interesting.
Yeah.
And then back to the class that we had both taken, what I had learned, what my takeaway was we have humans have created words to explain what things are. a
Mm,
mailbox. It is because we call it a mailbox because we created the word mailbox. But
mm,
in reality, it is a piece of metal or a piece of whatever.
yeah.
And we also created those words. So breaking life down to more instinctual, what I was talking in the beginning
Mm-hmm.
of humans have started to lose their connection with their instincts and their humanity in some ways because there's a rule written. I'm a safety analysis, by the way, and I love safety and
Mm.
everything nice, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
and I do believe that safety can still be achieved while
Mm,
being able to do the right thing. Like you don't have to be so rigid all the time with things that happen. If you stop trusting your instincts so much, you stop losing that strength in your instinct. And like I read an article a few years back, kids are losing their balance as they're not
mm,
taught really balance because they're not out on their bicycles. They're downstairs playing video games. Like
mm.
so back in the day, people's balance was much, much better than they are today. And I contribute that same thing to instinct. So just practice your instincts, I guess.
Yeah, that is
Your
really
balance.
interesting. So you're even making the connection between like our sort of our emotional IQ or our intelligence with even our physical balance of just being connected to our surroundings, like being very present in the moment to just where we are physically and emotionally. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely. And even talking about money. Some people are so stressed about money, and yes, money is stressful, but money
Mhm.
is also paper.
Yeah,
There is so much more to life than paper and other material things. There's
yeah.
experience. At the end, when we're done, I have a quote to read that's my favorite quote. I think I've
Oh,
shared it
cool.
with you in the car ride, so
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah, that kind of concept, just your attitude, your intention for life, right? I think just mirrored a lot of my intention for life, right? And I also really appreciated like our ability to be intentional with our words, that our words do create our life around us, right? And they create the next step for us. And I think being able to choose to look outside of the walls, right? And that's kind of even like my beyond the walls concept, right? Of being able to like, how do we even recognize what are we calling it? What have we labeled this world that's around us? Who have we decided makes a safe or an unsafe person? And we can use our life experiences and we can use that intuition that you're talking about. And the more connected we are, and the more we're willing to see individuals, right? Like I think that was something that came out in a lot of our conversation was even though we had different experiences, we have different values in different areas, that because we were willing to see each other as individuals, as human beings that matter. You're not representing an angry mob. You're not representing all of these kinds of people, right? Like so many times, and especially right now, right? We just had this crazy election, and the country, like, all we hear is divisiveness, fear your neighbor, fear the people, fear each other, fear anybody that's different than you. And I think that was probably like just such a life giving dynamic that we were able to share with each other.
And I love that we got to share that with your kids of
Um,
they got to experience that life is you don't have to be hidden away all the time. You can still experience life and adventures. Because I remember growing up, if you see a car, I grew up in the country. So if you see a car, you dive into the trees and you hide behind a tree. You don't want to walk alongside the road. Kids, when you drive around neighborhoods, it's very rare you see a parent playing baseball in the yard with the kid anymore. And when I do see it, it lights me up. I'm so happy that that exists and um, people have those experiences. I feel like people are getting so sucked into screens and
Yeah.
scrolling that you can scroll for hours and like, oh,
Yeah.
what time is it? Where am I? And all of that dopamine is depleted. And by
Yeah.
the time you're done, too exhausted from scrolling, you're too exhausted to do anything else.
Yeah.
I say
Yeah.
Newton's law all the time. If you're stuck sitting and if you start with a step, it's a lot easier. Like that one rule of if you don't want to clean your house, set a 10-minute timer.
Yes.
And by the time you're up, you're like, yeah, I'm cleaning, I'm doing stuff. So,
Yes.
so
Yeah.
it's just, it starts with one step. It takes that motivation and that leap of faith. If
Yeah.
you're unhappy, keep coaching. Don't stay stagnant. That was what my life parents taught me as a good life lesson of
Mm.
in careers and roles. Because I was at PetSmart for many years and I loved it. And I was looking for a new adventure and a new challenge. And the new company I worked at, they questioned of if I was job hopping too much of within the company of like I wasn't I like it, but I want to do something else.
Yeah.
And by doing that, now I'm thinking it. I love what I do, and
Yeah.
take that. Don't give up until you have found something that you desire and interests you, and
Yeah.
you would do for free almost.
Yes. Yeah. And be afraid, right? Like, I think even being able to hear that story when you were sharing about that, right? Like, I think it's so easy in our lives when something comes up against us, right? Like, either we lose a job or something happened outside of our control that we didn't expect or didn't want, or it derails us, right? Like, it kind of disrupts the flow that we were on. I'm trying to get to point A to point B, and something doesn't go the way we expected it to, right? How do
Mhm.
you stay flexible enough to be in the moment, to say, okay, what am I going to do now about it? What is possible, right? And I have that, and have other people along the journey. And so maybe that's even like, if you guys are hit with a wall, if you're hit with some kind of upset, or the disruption from your point A to point B gets hit, how, like, there is a possibility to not just completely shut down, freak out, box out the world. And I think that's so much that, like, I really got out of that weekend, that the course that we both went to, was like, how do we not just box ourselves in? What am I making it mean about me and making it mean about somebody else? And what else could be possible? Like, can I still get to where I was trying to go? I have to go a different way. Can I pivot? Is there another way to get there? Like, is there some kind of lesson that I need to learn on the way to getting to that other place?
Exactly.
Right. And I think,
Yeah, it's definitely all experiences, and good or bad is still experience. It teaches you something. Even if
yeah,
it's a really hard experience, it makes you appreciate those really good times. So
yeah,
I see value in everything that gets thrown at me. And I'm
yeah,
probably too optimistic in some situations, but what's the worst that can happen?
yeah.
Like we're talking about going on a trip to a location, and my partner's coworker is like, well, I was there.
Ah,
And I'm like, well, that's not good, but also you have a story to tell about. And you have but you're fine, you're alive. Like
yeah,
you can pick up your pieces and move on. Even in the worst of worst situations, you're still alive. You still have your
yeah,
self. You
yeah.
still you have your mentality and you can choose how you want to handle it.
It's recoverable.
So
Well, and I think being able to, there is that, the balance, and I'm sure you can see it. And maybe if you want to speak to it, you can. Like, as a safety analysis, there is no guarantee, right, of like perfect safety, like that we can completely prevent a worst case from happening, an unexpected disruption. Like, life is still living and organically happening. Like, we don't in between, like, I can't control and prevent everything from happening, but can I make the best of it? Can I be wise about it? Right. And I feel like that, trusting and adventurous and safe as we felt like we were, and we thought the other person was, we still took legit safety matters, right? Like, by taking the pictures and sending our contact information, and right, even if something didn't go bad, what if we just were in an accident and our loved ones needed to know? right? Like there just is still some like common sense that we can take, but
Yeah.
not be like sheltering ourselves in this bubble to ever prevent life from happening.
Mhm. Some of the happiest people and most optimistic people on earth are the people that have been through the most hardship.
Mm,
Experiencing pain and suffering is sometimes the key to happiness in some people's
yeah.
minds. And I know an elderly gentleman who's been through a world of pain and a world of hardship and and he is the happiest person I have ever met. He is so wonderful. But that's sometimes what I can't remember the name of the quote of who else said it. I love quotes. Uh, but it's true. It's the more you experience, the you can look up. Like you've already been through the worst of it, so and you got nowhere to go but up.
Totally. It helps us be more resilient. And I think to appreciate the times when it goes well, I think it does help us to be able to celebrate. And I think that's really why I created what I'm doing now, because I was right where I'm just like, live it small, live it tiny, don't make mistakes, just stay in this bubble. Let me be as happy as I can within this tiny scope. And I think, but then life, like, I don't want to be afraid anymore. I don't want to make those choices and those decisions based on prevention, right? Let me just avoid hardship. It creates a completely different kind of hardship. And I think once I could realize that for myself, that I can't, like, it's a way to live. I just couldn't live it that way anymore. And I would rather experience, like, I'm okay to experience hardship, but I chose. What do you feel like was your biggest lesson outside of what you've already shared, I suppose?
And I fully believe in that. And one of the lessons my parents or I picked up along the way, but I've been thinking it for years, is when I'm 90 or some age, when I look back on my life, did I do everything that I wanted to do? Did I have fun? Did I take that adventure? Did I do the things that I wanted to do? And every moment, every crossroad I come to, I ask myself that.
Yeah.
Like the car ride, I'm like, I could have just waited for 48 hours and eventually got back to Minnesota.
Yeah.
But this is an opportunity for an adventure. Like I can't. This is gonna be fun. Like it
Yeah.
was, and I love it, and I wouldn't take it back for the world. I just love
Mm-hmm.
embracing life and experiencing things. And the more you know, the scarier things are.
Mm.
So, for example, when I was a teenager, I was swimming in the Amazon River and I kicked something and I like kind of panicked and I looked at the tour guide person that was with us. He was like, "Oh yeah, an anaconda ate a 4-year-old up the river last week." And I was like, and that was scary enough. And then I came back home and then in my adult life, I watched the show River Monsters and there is
Mm-hmm.
no way I would ever have gone swimming in the Amazon. But it was an experience. I get to swim swimming in the Amazon. But it like
Yes.
so the less you know sometimes is better for experience at least.
Yes. Yeah. But
And
but I think in that, when you say no this time, though, like you probably wouldn't, I assume you would not swim again in the Amazon like you did when you were a kid, right? But
yeah.
you're now saying no to an adventure, right? With purpose and intention. You're not just avoiding it because you're
Mhm.
just afraid. You learn something from it, right? Like you can get wiser about it. And I think that's even for me, what I do a lot, I talk a lot about in my coaching is being really clear with owning your yes and your no, right? Like
Right.
having a really good why or a good why not, right? And I think that was kind of in your, like what you're talking about with the car ride. Like, yeah, we could have. I just recently watched Home Alone with my son Tim. We were watching it, and in Home Alone, right? The mom is trying to, like, she's working heaven and earth like we were to, like, get back home on a much more serious note than we were. We just really wanted to get to
Yeah.
our destinations. But I was rewatching it with this new lens of what we did and our adventure that we went on and relating to the mom in a very different way this time. But it's so funny in that same thought is like she did so much wheeling and dealing, creating this adventure. She worked really hard to travel back home and she got home the exact same time as the original flight was, right? Like the family shows up on that Friday morning flight she was unwilling to wait for. And so it just kind of cracked me up. That was like, okay, maybe it wasn't the fastest and the most efficient, but she certainly learned a lot about herself and had an experience, right? Like
Exactly.
she would have rather have done that kind of work than the guilt she would have had by staying in a hotel for
Yes.
2 days, just panicking in agony. Like she took action. She was like, I'm going to go do
Yes.
whatever it takes. And I think it's in that space that's like, man, if we don't say no just because of fear and prevention, like, let me just avoid a character growth, let me just avoid being stretched in some way. And instead, we just say yes to an exciting adventure, whatever comes our way. I'm just going to do it the very best I can with the information that I have now. What's the very best thing I can do?
Yes. And if you've seen the movie Yes Man, it's experience, because if you just say no to everything, you're going to miss out on so much.
Yeah.
But at the end of the movie, you learn you don't have to say yes to everything, but you do say yes to embrace life and have the experiences. Otherwise, you're just,
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
it can be a lonely, sad life and without experience and stories to tell. When you're too old to go skydiving, you can still talk about the experience that you had when you were younger. So
Yep. Totally.
that's what we have in life.
And then you have these bonding moments, right? You have great stories for your like two truths and
Yes.
a lie, your icebreakers, your
Yeah,
when you meet
that's a
another
good
person,
one.
you have another Me Too event, right? Like a good Me Too, like a
Yes.
good experience that you can both be excited about and to be on the adventure together. It is great stories. What was your quote
Yeah.
you wanted to share with us?
Yes. All right. Um, let's see. One can travel 10,000 miles and not travel at all, just as one can live 90 years without really having lived. Travel is not a matter of distance, numbers registered on a speedometer, words stamped on a passport. It is a matter of exposure and confrontation, a matter of the skin, the stomach, the nerves, and the heart. By L.M. Shulman.
Love it.
Yes.
Well, Tracy, I'm really glad that we got to be on the adventure together. We have a great story to tell others when we are 90 and to be just a positive. I'm glad that it was a positive experience. And I think it just inspires us both, I'm sure, to just continue to take the adventures in our life. And for those of you listening, I hope what you're hearing is say yes. We don't have to be immediately afraid of everybody. And if you just give other people a chance, you just might be really surprised and excited that you might have needed the adventure that you got taken on. What about you, Tracy? Any things you would say?
You said it very, very well. But I just want to thank everyone for listening, their time, and sharing that adventure with us. And hopefully you have some of your own. Maybe you can be on the next podcast. And
There you go. Yeah, tell us about it. Yeah, find me on Instagram, beyondthewalls.podcast, and tell us your adventures that you've been on, all your crazy dreams. And
yes.
fly frontier cautiously.
Right. And this is sponsored by Delta. Just kidding.
Tracy, thank you so much for your time. It was so fun to catch up with you again. And
When your kids are done with therapy and they want to go on another adventure, you still have my phone number.
I will let you know. Thanks for joining us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope that brought you a lot of encouragement and some information to be able to apply to your own life and to start taking down those walls that are in your way. What is that one thing that you want to take on and take with you today? I would love to hear from you and to hear about it. Follow me here on the podcast so that you're alerted and don't miss any upcoming episodes. You can find me on Instagram or even on my website at beyondthewallspodcast.com. If you want more help, I offer one-on-one coaching and would love to connect with you. Until next time, have a great day.